Happy Monday. How y'all doing out there? It's raining here in Richmond. I hope you all are doing well wherever you are. This is Dr. D here. Good evening, courageous leaders. Um, some of you who may know me as an educator for years, where my passion has been empowering anyone that touches, especially Black and Brown students in urban areas, anyone who is impacting Black and Brown students, making sure that I'm supporting them in the best way possible. So my passion is empowering urban school leaders so that they can lead with confidence, right? So they can transform the instructional culture in their buildings and feel affirmed. That requires some steps, right? Leading with clarity and leading courageously, which is why I always address us as courageous leaders. And so we have to be courageous in this work, right? One of my favorite sayings, I say it all the time, by Margaret Wheatley, is be brave enough to have the conversations that matter. Be brave enough to start those conversations that matter. And I'll add, on top of that, is courageous enough to create the disruption needed to change the current public school conditions that we have right now, right? So we need action now, and that's one of the reasons why I go on live every Monday at 6:30, right? Hoping to connect with you all and be inspired by your comments and hopefully to inspire you along the way. So um, the purpose of this live, which is called "What Are Your Thoughts," is to connect current issues and the impact that it has on school leadership. Right. Um, we also know how leaders can develop. We also know that the more we talk about leadership and the challenges that we have and potential solutions to those challenges, that it can shift a leader's lens, which is necessary to be a change agent in this work. So our goal here, or the goal here in terms of coming on and connecting with you all, is to move from being reactive to things and being more proactive, right? To dismantle that status quo. And the reason how we do that is I'm a firm believer in using data. Data is everything. And I'm not talking about just test assessments, the assessments that are given to schools from the state. I'm talking about using data that is living in your buildings every day, all day long. Like, how are you collecting that data, right? Um, and so my goal is to connect articles, some research articles, to how what the data is saying in those articles and how we as school leaders can use that data to really improve our practice. So let's get started. This article here is talking about, let me backtrack. So last week, I sent a post because I changed. I was going to do talk about de-implementation last week, but shifted that to talk about it today. So there's this theory around this phrase called de-implementation, right? Um, like let me backtrack a little more. Like thinking, like wondering, how do you keep your team aligned and motivated, right, while navigating this whole complex world of implementing new strategies and phasing out old ones, right? Like when we think about one of my sessions on what are your thoughts was about, comprehensive school improvement, like putting in new strategies to address the gaps that we see in education and in specific schools, especially the bottom 5% who receive funding. So today we're going to dig deeper into that game, like those types of approaches, and how we can lead schools to achieve results by leading in courage and leading with data. Okay. So that's how de-implementation, this phrase, this theory comes into play. And so there are a couple of researchers that this article is talking about. Um, and one of them is, I hope I don't botch the name up, but it's Kruzak, Kruzakzik, Kruzakzik, Prudak. No, anyway, Przaksy. And we also know some other ones, DeWitt, Prasad, Wang. They all have done some research around this theory of de-implementation. And de-implementation is simply the process of reducing or stopping the use or delivery of services or practices that are ineffective, unproven, harmful, overused, or inappropriate, right? That's one definition for it. So basically, it's getting rid of the stuff that doesn't work. But the catch here is like, how do you know the stuff isn't working? We know that our public school system has not been doing well by our most marginalized kids, especially our Black and brown babies. And we see it. We see the output, right? Like it's not working. It's working in spots, but not enough for real change. And so this process of de-implementation is talking about like, how do we determine those things that are not working and get rid of them, all based in data, right? And so let's talk about numbers and the impact. So picture this, nearly 60% of these low performing schools, um, well, sorry, let's talk about, I lost my thought for a second. Too many things going on in my head. Let's talk about, um, like last week I put up a post around how to use a process to help in terms of this de-implementation and with the acronym ACE, right? Like assess where your school is in terms of um, how effective are your collaborative meetings? Do you need to are teachers walking away actually implementing the things that are happening in professional development? Assessing whether or not uh, you have like your attendance in terms of the systems that you put in place, or if you have any systems that are in place for staff attendance or student attendance, how impactful are they, right? Like asking questions like, is this working? Why or why not? That's assessing. And you can pick anything in your school to assess those things, right? Um, the other thing is uh, change. Once you assess, what are you going to change about what you've discovered, right? This is about collecting data. You notice that teachers are leaving professional learning and still not implementing what they've been like what's been going on. You have to change something. Either you have to change something about your process with monitoring those things to see, change something with supporting your teachers, right? Or maybe even change how you are implementing your professional learning, your collaborative learning. Maybe the teachers don't need that PL, right? So those are the things you need to think about when looking at your data, and then execute. Once you come up with what it is you need to change, you need to execute on those things, right? So let's talk about the power of um, how to do that. There are 3 steps, and I'm talking very broad here. Okay. I'm not speaking specificity because specificity is going to happen on Saturday, March 9th, at the free Lead with Clarity and Confidence Without Overwhelm training. Starts at 10 a.m. I'll drop the registration link in the comments below, but I'm not going to get into specifics now and provide actual things that can happen. Just to give you examples, I'm going to speak very broad here. And again, this is based on theory because there has not been a lot of, there's very limited research for the evidence on de-implementation in schools, right? Because it was originally, it evolved out of the healthcare field. And so there's very little research on de-implementation, but we know as educators what this is when we hear it, right? It's about using the data and making changes based on the data and being really consistent with that. And so these are 3, I want to talk about 3 things very broadly that school leaders that we can do, you all can do in your classrooms, in your buildings right now, when you're thinking about de-implementation, when you're thinking about cutting the fluff and getting to what really matters. Like, what are the things that are having the biggest impact? That requires evidence. That requires a collection of data. So, here are three general broad things that can happen. The first thing is crystal clear communication. Communication is key. Imagine being able to articulate the why and the how behind adopting methods in your building, right? Sharing that with your staff, with your families, with your students. The whole school community needs to understand or hear you articulate the why and the how. It's about ensuring that everyone is on the same page, that everyone understands the goals, right? Like everyone buying into this vision. It isn't just about sending an email, right? It's about building a narrative that resonates with every member on your school team, with every stakeholder, right? You're making that vision as clear as the sun, okay? Last week I made a post, and in the post, the comment was, you as school leaders, the goal is to have a vision, like a vision that's locked away serves absolutely no one. And so articulating it verbally in your actions, when you're having hallway conversations, bringing up points of your vision, mentioning it, like speaking on it all the time to each person that you meet and walking in that, right? So people understand, wow, this school leader really has a vision for the school and I understand what it is, right? So that any stranger walking in the building can ask any random adult in the building, like, what's the vision for the school? And they should all be able to say about the same thing because you have been so clear and so, which is number two, consistent with articulating your vision, right? Again, this is broad. De-implementation is a process that requires very specific things, right? That specific things can be done to de-implement initiatives that are having very little impact in your building. So the first thing is clear communication about your vision, right? We don't want your vision locked away. It's not going to serve anybody. The second thing is consistency. Consistency is your best friend. I cannot express this any clearer or harder. Consistency is so key here, right? In DCT Consulting, the consulting firm that I operate, there's a framework called the Change the Narrative Framework, and consistency is a part of that framework. It's one of the pieces, one of the 9 C's that act as um, kind of like the flywheel, right? Jim Collins' flywheel, that inertia, that spinning, that momentum, that builds momentum to get things going and moving. That consistency is a key lever for that flywheel to move, right? Consistency is your best friend, especially when it comes to the language that we use, right? It's like crafting a soundtrack for success in professional learning and curriculum implementation. So, by adopting a consistent and coherent language, you are laying down essentially like a really solid foundation. It has to be consistent. And one of the things I have found, even in my own leadership, especially like all throughout my leadership, right, is the practice of consistency. Early on in my leadership, like consistency was like it didn't even exist, right? I learned as an early leader that the things I shouldn't be doing through the mistakes that I made. And one of the things that I learned throughout my leadership is that consistency is the thing that changes behaviors, mindsets. It's a key lever for the change that you want to see. And if we're talking about de-implementation, when you think about it, you the goal is to unlearn things, right? Or don't do things that the district is telling you to do because you've tried it and you have evidence to show that it is not impactful in your school, right? And so that requires consistency. You have to consistently collect the data, consistently analyze it so that you have evidence so that when you speak to whomever your supervisor is from the district, you can present them with a nice, clean, you know, set of numbers that indicate why you are not doing this thing because it's not impactful and why you're choosing to do this other thing because it has this kind of impact, right? So consistency is so key, right? The level of consistency that's needed to reach your goals for your school is you can't even see it. It is a practice that you have to be intentional with every single day. Um, It takes time because I know as a school leader, for me, I felt like there were so many things going on at once that it was so difficult to be consistent in any one thing. I would start off strong and have the buy in from staff. And then because other things popped up, it drew me away from the vision that I had, right? It drew me away from me acting in taking the steps toward the vision that I had, right? Um, Even though I still had it, I was being drawn away from it from other things that happened in the building. And not until I was able to develop the dream team, right? We called ourselves the dream team because when we were together, we were we were it. Okay, I'm tooting my own horn because we were it. um, Once the dream team came together, which took time to get as well, to build. And sometimes that means having conversations where people just need to, maybe this is not the building for you, right? But I digress. That's another, what are your thoughts? But once the dream team came on board and we were all on the same page about the vision, the things that I needed to do to make sure that everybody else was moving in that way, I was able to do it because all of the little things that popped up, which were important, were handled by the dream team. It was an amazing synergy, and I miss that, right? And when you have that in your building, you know it because you feel it. And it takes time to build that. Like there's going to be some ebbing and flowing, but the ability to remain consistent has such a strong impact on your team, and then your team on your on the staff, the culture, the climate of the building. So share your thoughts. Let me know what you're thinking about what you're hearing. Please mention things in the comment so that we can continue the conversation. Okay. The third thing, because I mentioned two so far, I mentioned making sure that your vision is clear, that you're communicating a crystal clear vision for your de implementation, right? The what and the how. And then being consistent, right? Being consistent with what you're saying, what you're doing, making sure that you are in alignment, that your words are matching your actions at all times, right? And we're going to go down consistency is huge, and I'm going to talk about it more in different ways, but I'm not going to mention the actual processes and systems that you can put in place. I'm going to talk about that on Saturday, March 9th, when you register below for the Lead with Clarity and Confidence Without Overwhelm free training this Saturday at 10. And so the third thing, very broad again, when you're thinking about de-implementation, is like this creating a culture of inquiry around data, right? Not just one workshop, not just um, a one and done, like this is how you know, collect and analyze it, and then you send your staff off to just go and be great. That's not going to work. A lot of people, I have learned in this, is that a lot of people are really unsure about the data. They know how to collect it, they have the resources to collect the data, but once they have it, there is a challenge with knowing what to do based on what they see in that data, right? Um, and so having this creating this culture of inquiry around data is so critical because data provides the evidence for getting rid of your low impact actions in initiatives in your building, right? That is the whole point of de-implementation. It's not just a one-off workshop. Like for sustained growth and understanding, that has to be consistent. Use that word consistent again. There has to be consistent follow-up. There has to be consistent support. It has to be cyclical. Okay. It's about asking the tough questions with the data. If you're unsure and you feel discomfort in using data and looking at it, which a lot of people do, that's okay. You're supposed to be, right? Because that's where the growth comes in that discomfort. So that's a beautiful thing. You just have to ask the questions. Ask the questions to the people in the room. Don't wait for the meeting to be over and then ask questions. Ask the questions right there. Encourage your staff to ask the questions because sometimes they'll sit and just listen to you as the leader because you are the instructional leader of the building because they're looking to you for all of the answers. But sometimes you don't even have the answers, and that's okay. There were plenty of times I didn't have the answers in the room, and we had to have conversations around it. And by the end of the meeting, it was we figured out who was going to find out and what was needed to get an answer that we needed, right? Each person took a piece of discovering something to bring back to the table to make a better informed decision. Inquiry is so critical, right? Especially when we are talking about um, this process of de-implementation, which is really stopping the things that we know based on the evidence from the data that we know are not working, right? Um, and so, if it's about asking the tough questions and inviting a diverse range of voices to the table, it could be your school-wide leadership team. You could have a parent meeting just to talk about some of the challenges with specific initiatives that are being offered that you are showing them data that it's not working, it's not having an impact, but you're also showing them like potential solutions for it, right? And what research has shown that the potential solutions can have on the school community, right? Sharing with the school, not just in an email because parents don't really one look at the emails like that, and then two, some of them may not even understand what it is they're reading, which is why it's so important to have these family nights where you're talking about this, especially if this is a big initiative, because the implementation takes some time. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes planning, right? This approach encourages a collective responsibility when you are sharing in this way. So do you see how all three of them, they're all broad, but they're all connected. The crystal clear communication, consistency, and then creating this culture of like this inquiry, the culture of inquiry around data, right? With your staff, with your families, right? It's so important to make sure that those three things exist while you are engaging in this process of getting rid of the fluff. Get rid of the stuff that ain't working, okay? Because you're wasting your time and you're spinning your wheels. I felt I was spinning my wheels. It was the worst feeling in the world. I would sit up with my computer and papers on my dining room table and fall asleep at the table. And my daughter would come downstairs and like, Mom, get up and go to sleep. Like that is not sustainable. And so eventually I had to learn through data. I learned this, right? Because there was a program that the district at the time was um, using to support principals in understanding how to use data effectively by using the data cycle, the data teams process. And I took it by the horns and ran with it and committed to it. And it was one thing that I committed to, and that one thing changed everything else. The ripple effect it had changed everything else in the building. Staff started to understand like what data was and how important it was. Staff started having conversations about data on their own, asking questions. It was a beautiful transformation. But again, that came through me being pushed in the corner, feeling completely overwhelmed, not knowing what to do. And thank goodness the district had the foresight to provide this type of training. I don't know if your districts have this type of training, but I could help you out with that. Um, and so once I got a clearer understanding and articulated to staff what and how we were going to use the data, it changed everything. And that's what de-implementation was. That gave me the confidence to say to my supervisor, well, no, we're not going to use that because this data piece shows that that practice is ineffective for our students, right? We're going to use this practice because the research showed this and we've attempted it and look at the progress that has been made, right? This is where you gain your confidence as a leader when you are speaking about the data and knowing your data and the impact that it has. De-implementation cannot happen without data. It is absolutely impossible, right? Change cannot happen without data. You have to assess what you have in your building to see how well it's working, why it's working the way it is or not working the way it is, what things need to change, right? You have to assess. And then you change what needs to be changed. That requires a plan for you to execute. So if de-implementation cannot happen without data, learning and understanding your data builds confidence and clarity. And confidence and clarity breeds courageousness. It breeds bravery to say no to the things that have little to no impact in your building. So there's a cycle there, right? Like you need the data. The data breeds confidence and clarity. Confidence breeds courageousness and the bravery that you need to say no and change the things that are having little to no impact in your building. There's a cycle. It is, it works. And I wanted to share with you like this whole idea of de-implementation because it's been coming up a lot lately and you may have heard it. And it's being shared a lot, like in this article, which I didn't go through the whole thing with you because I just basically broke it down to you right now. Um, but like this whole idea of de-implementation is just another word for things that we've done before in education because that's one thing I've learned being in education for 3 decades is that all they do is give phrases a facelift with maybe another letter and it's basically the same thing, right? But if you follow this system of using the data and getting comfortable with data, you will definitely see and feel more confident in your leadership ability, in your leadership approach. Your staff will start to see you differently when you are speaking about data every single time. Like, what's the evidence? What does the data say? Why does it say that? Let's get to the root. And then making decisions based on that. When you're making evidence based decisions, coupled with some research, you can't lose. There are other challenges, right, that come along with that, like resources and all those other things, which we've talked about before. Um, but understanding and knowing your data and speaking very clearly about what it is your goal is, having your vision, speaking clearly, clear communication, and using the data are the three overarching pieces of de implementation to get started in your building, right? And so these are very broad steps again, but on Saturday at 10 a.m., the Lead with Clarity and Confidence free training, um, you will participants who attend will walk away with more specific strategies like the what and the where, right? Um, to share like how do you cut the fluff in the things that are not working in your school buildings? How do you get more impact? Um, and that's going to be shared. How we're going to do that is by looking at systems and processes, how we can implement those things. Um, and so the other piece of it too is like in my experience is how you use your leadership team, your instructional leadership team, because you can't do this work alone. I'm sure you all know this by now. Um, but I wanted to talk about this de-implementation theory because it is popping up a lot. Okay. So what do you say? Are you ready to lead with clarity and confidence? Okay. I'm sure you are. I'll put the registration link in the chat below. Um, but again, those three things overarching: having a clear and consistent communication, a clear, crystal clear communication, right? And it also needs to be consistent. Consistency in everything, the communication, the professional learning, everything. And then using data for everything. Actually, data should be number one, right? Like using your data for everything. I believe data should be number one. So think about how you can begin to implement those things. And even though we're on the downslope of the school year, you can think about one of the three right now, and the one out of the three that I would suggest looking at practicing is your data piece. Like, how are you digging into your data? How do you know that the data practices that you have right now in your building are having an impact on your teachers and your students, right? Can a random stranger walking to the building, into your school building, and ask any one of your teachers about your data practices? Would they be able to answer and respond on a really deep level, right? If they can't, then that's something that you need. That's a piece of data, right? Getting to the root means asking questions, collecting data all the time as you're walking through the building. When you're giving a survey, a random survey, two questions, you can give it every month to your teachers, asking the same two questions to see if it changes over time, right? You have to be being creative in how you're collecting data so that you can make decisions based on that data is really critical here. So keep going, school leaders. Be brave about the decisions that you make. Change and like being a change agent and disrupting what we know is not working requires bravery. So please be brave and also have your evidence and your research to back it up, right? Saying you're not going to do something just to say you're not going to do it is not productive. So having your evidence, your data to back up the decision that you make is going to disrupt what we see happening in our public school system now. So keep going, y'all. Okay? Remember, it's about creating a space where everyone feels included in your school's mission to change the narrative for kids, especially black and brown, our black and brown babies, okay? Regardless of the zip code that they live in. Keep going. And thank you so much for spending your time with me today or watching the replay. I appreciate you. Please drop your comments in the chat, and I'm going to link this article and also the registration link for this Saturday, March 9th at 10 a.m. for Lead with Clarity and Confidence Without Overwhelm. Hope to see you there and have a fantastic week.